There are tuneful sounding cars, epic sounding cars, and then there's this, the new Cayman GT4 RS. It's like having treacle poured into your ear and then an entire colony of wasps poured in after it. It just sounds utterly bonkers. Actually, come on, let's do this properly. We'll drop it down to second gear, pin it, keep it pinned. Oh my God, that is 9,000 RPM, and that, hands down, easily, is the best sounding car I've ever driven. It's like heroin for your ear holes. And here's the best bit, because with most high performance, decent sounding cars, you just know that it sounds good from the driving seat, but it sounds even better if you were standing over there by the side of the road. So you're effectively performing a public service, but not in this car. In this car, the cabin is where it's at, because what we're listening to is induction noise, courtesy of these two carbon fiber intakes where the rear quarter windows would normally be, that feed air directly into the engine. And that's why you get this incredible orchestra inside the cabin. It's a trick that Singer used on the DLS to great effect. But compared to this, that's a car that costs about £1 gazillion more.
If you've ever wondered what would happen if Porsche stuffed the stupendous 4-litre naturally aspirated flat 6 from the latest 911 GT3 into the back of its mid-engine baby brother, the Cayman, this is your answer. This is Porsche's GT department letting its hair down, saying, "Hold my Stein," and producing the car that we've all dreamed about, but never thought they'd actually have the nerve to put into production.
You can imagine the meeting, can't you? Andreas Preuninger, boss of Porsche's GT department, pitching to the board why they should definitely put a car this wild into production. He leaves the room calmly, and then when he gets in the corridor outside, it's big fist pumps when he gets the green light, because it begs a few questions, this car. Like, doesn't it, step on the 911 GT3's toes a bit? You see, at just under £110,000, the GT4 RS costs 15 grand less than a 911 GT3. It also weighs 20 kilograms less, it's got an identical 0 to 62 time, and it's only 6 seconds slower around the Nürburgring. Plus, it's got a very similar layout, hasn't it? 2 seats and then a roll cage behind you. But Preuninger insists they're two very different beasts.
This car is a live concert on 4 wheels. It's such an entertainer, and it was such a fun project to make a fun car. And that was something that came from our hearts, and we wanted to do that a long time.
All right, no complaints there, but the GT3 isn't exactly unentertaining, is it?
And so we are very eager to give the GT3 everything we can to let it stay on pole position, like we did now with a double wishbone front axle. It has rear axle steering, it has all these gizmos that makes the car really fast. This is the mid-engine car, so it stands for its own, and we didn't look too much into super aero and eke out the last tenth of a second on the track. This is a little bit of a hybrid between a driver's car that you use on a mountainous road and a great car for track days. We tried to find the perfect compromise here, and I think we did, because from the emotional point of view, this is a complete different experience.
He's got a point. Perhaps the GT3 could be accused of being a little bit too clinical, a bit too polished, whereas this car feels like it's been built purely for driving fun, not necessarily technical prowess. And that's a philosophy I can very much get behind.
A quick recap on the numbers then. We have 493 brake horsepower, that's 79 brake horsepower more than the standard GT4, but 10 brake horsepower less than a GT3 because the exhaust has to take a more tortuous route around the rear suspension, while torque gets a slight bump to 332 pounds-feet, and it's PDK only. No manual gearbox here, gutted. Still, 0 to 62 takes 3.4 seconds, a GT4 with PDK takes 3.9, and the top speed is 195 miles an hour. Perhaps more impressive is the Nürburgring lap time of 7 minutes 4.5 seconds, over 23 seconds quicker than the standard GT4.
Let's not dwell on the facts and figures too much, shall we? Because it's just not that type of car. The measure of this car's success is how much you're enjoying yourself while you're driving it. And we're here on this gorgeous bit of road just north of Lisbon, and it's absolutely fantastic. And if I can just detach for 1 minute the sensations I'm feeling from the throttle pedal, from the noise that's going into my ears, well, it is a mighty, mighty powertrain. The throttle response is fantastic. Of course, you've got that classic naturally aspirated pin sharp response when you want it from the engine, but there's so much traction, and the acceleration in this car, it's pretty brutal. But the best thing about it is the fact that it's naturally aspirated. So all the torque, the peak power, it occurs right in the upper echelons of the rev range. So you're rewarded the more you keep your foot in, with better noises and better responses from the engine. The steering is fantastic. We're used to this stuff now, isn't it? But it just feels so natural. There's loads of feedback. The brakes too, we've got carbon ceramics here. They are a bit squeaky at lower speeds, but cannot fault them. The feedback you get through the pedal, the power you get when you really step on them, it's all spot on. And then the gearbox, yeah, loads of people are going to be complaining about the fact that it isn't a manual, but let me tell you, this PDK is an event in itself. When you bang through the gears, you get that hydraulic hiss, and then the bang when the next ratio engages. And there's a bit of a story behind this gearbox too, because while the engine, minus the intake and the airbox and the engine mounts, is identical to the 911 GT3, they couldn't just use the same gearbox. If they turned it around 180 degrees, you'd end up with 7 reverse gears. So they've basically constructed a greatest hits gearbox, including the gear set from the 991 GT4 RS, meaning this has the shortest gear ratios of any GT car ever. Hooray! In second gear in the GT4 PDK, you'd get to about 77 miles an hour before you ran out of revs. Here, you could take it to 72 miles an hour, but do not forget that you've got an extra 1,000 RPM to play with in this car. It means on roads like this, you only really need second and third gear. Maybe a bit of fourth if you want to save your hearing.
Question is the GT4 RS too hardcore to be a car you use regularly on the road? In other words, is its more natural home the track?
Well, you can't argue the fact that with its wings and slashes and vents and cut-out arches and all of that stuff, this car does, yes, very much look like a racetrack refugee. But don't be fooled, because we drove this car down on the motorway, and in 7th gear, it's perfectly usable and perfectly comfortable. The damping on this car is absolutely genius. It's firm, yes, but it just rounds off all those harsh edges. It's not going to bash you about and give you a headache, and you can knock off some of the noise if you like. Not the intake noise, that's fixed, but there's a switchable exhaust button down here which reduces some of the exhaust drone when you just want to cruise along quietly. And then we get to the seats. These bucket seats are absolutely superb. They put all other seats of this type to shame, because they hold you in place exactly as you want to be held, but they're perfectly comfortable at the same time. And you've got all sorts of luxuries in this cabin. You've got aircon, you've got the Porsche infotainment, well, you would do if they hadn't deleted it as a no-cost option in this particular press car, which is a ridiculous decision in my mind, because it saves what, a kilogram? Who did that? Stupid. So, despite appearances, the GT4 RS really is quite a well-rounded road car. But in the interests of thorough journalism, and because we've got a circuit to play with, we should probably have a go on track as well, shouldn't we?
Before we head out then, just a chance to highlight a few bits that might actually work in my favour out there. And firstly, there's been some lightweighting going on. Stuff like the lighter, thinner rear glass. We've also got carbon fibre reinforced plastic for the bonnet and for this front wing. And on the insides, we've got fabric door pulls, thinner carpets, less insulation. Every gram counts. So the overall curb weight is now 1,415 kilograms, which is 35 kilograms less than a GT4 with a PDK box. Michelin Cup 2R tyres are available as an option, although this car is going to stay on the standard Cup 2, same tyres that we used on the road yesterday. Those Cup 2Rs, by the way, those are the tyres that Jörg Bergmeister used to devastating effect to set that Nürburgring lap time. Downforce, you've probably noticed this enormous swan neck rear spoiler. Now that's manually adjustable. There's also a manually adjustable front diffuser. Put both of those in their most aggressive settings and you got 25% more downforce than you get in a GT4. Suspension. We don't have the same double wishbone front suspension you get on the new GT3, but we do have bespoke spring and damper rates all round, and I'm told they're the exact same rates as you get on a GT2 RS, which is remarkable given just how friendly this car was on the road. If you want to go all the way, there's the optional £9,000 Weissach pack as fitted to this car that includes a titanium exhaust system with tips inspired by the retro-tastic 935, logos on the headrests, Porsche lettering on the rear screen, an exposed carbon weave on the enlarged induction ducts, airbox cover, mirror trims, rear wing and bonnet. The body mat stripe, by the way, is an option. A Club Sport pack that includes a steel roll cage and bucket seats is a no-cost option, but you can swap in a titanium roll cage for £2,000, add ceramic brakes for around £6,000, and only if you buy the Weissach pack, you can swap out the 20-inch forged aluminium rims for 20-inch forged magnesium wheels that save 10 kilograms, but cost £10,500.
Got all that? Good, excellent. I've forgotten most of it already. Let's go for a drive, shall we? Okay, here we go then, the GT4 RS on track, and sorry if I'm shouting a little bit more than I normally would, but it's the only way you're gonna hear me. Quick word on the setup then. We don't have Cup 2R tyres, we've just got the same Cup 2 tyres that we had on the road yesterday. We don't have driving modes like you get in lesser Porsches, but you do have a few buttons down here. So we got the PDK in sport mode, we got the suspension in its firmer setting, we've got the sports exhaust set to loud, and that's all we need, isn't it? And let's just take another moment to appreciate the sound that this engine makes, because honestly, it's like a rock concert in here, but there's texture to the noise. So if we come out of this corner here, second gear, third gear actually, and we'll bury our foot here, it hardens, then it rattles, and that final 1,000 RPM, that is when it just goes completely bananas. Don't think I could ever get bored of that. Okay, so let's describe what I'm feeling when I'm throwing this thing into the corners, because the chassis on this car is so good. There's an agility to it. It's inherently a little bit more playful than the 911 GT3. That's because it's mid-engined, and you can just feel it wants to rotate a little bit on the way in and on the way out, and the traction is just enormous. So you can bury your foot way earlier than you think. It's a car that you drive with your fingertips, whereas with the GT3 you're probably using your shoulders a little bit more to muscle it around, but whoa, it's such a special thing. Here we come, end of the straight, on the brakes, third gear, turning it in, there it is, late apex, on the gas, it just feels totally neutral. Now we've got the traction control and the ESC on at the moment, but it doesn't feel intrusive, and that's partly because of all that grip, but also because the electronic systems are so well integrated, and the car is just so naturally balanced that it doesn't need to interfere that much. Yes, there is delicacy here to go with that sledgehammer performance. Now, I'm sorry to harp on about it, but there's going to be lots of people watching this video that are saying, I want a manual gearbox, and it's a bit of an omission for Porsche not to offer one in this car. Now, this is what I'll say about that. Would I like this car to have a manual gearbox? Would I like to try that car? Yes, I would. I think it would be absolutely sensational, but it would go against the RS grain. Traditionally, RS cars are about maximum control, and with the PDK, you can keep your hands on the wheel. And honestly, right now, I've got plenty going on that I'm not missing the manual gearbox at all. I've been driving this car for 2 days, road and track, and at no point have I thought, it's lacking a bit because I don't have a manual. It would be a great car, but look, honestly, Porsche have been known to make some fairly significant U-turns in the face of overwhelming public support. So, if you feel that strongly about a manual gearbox, may I suggest you start lobbying them now. You'll notice I'm not exactly pulling 90 mile an hour big smoky drifts like the Stig, because I can't be bothered, but there is a little bit of fun to be had just getting the tail out if you turn everything off in the hairpins. But do you know what? I'd argue that a car like this, the fact that it can light up the rear tyres and get its drift on, is probably the least surprising thing about it. What I love about this car is that there's levels of engagement. You could be a pro driver and get so much out of this, or a complete novice and just enjoy the drama and the noise and the sheer experience of it. It's flipping impressive that even with their crazy pants on, Porsche can produce a car that is this well-rounded as a road car and as a track car. But there's one big question, isn't it? This or a 911 GT3? Come on! This! All day long! This!
So, does the world really need a GT4 RS when we already have a 911 GT3 and a nutjob GT3 RS coming later this year? Absolutely, and my word am I glad this car exists. An all-electric Cayman is on the horizon, and Porsche's GT department senses that the combustion engine is entering its twilight years, so it wants to build these types of cars while it still can. These monuments to what's possible when you mix phenomenal engineering with a bit of fun. And right now, I can't think of anything more entertaining than the GT4 RS. What a car.